Good morning. What I want to do this in this particular session is to kind of tie everything together so that we can move into the last couple of assignments and hopefully wrap things up for you. Um, just want to reiterate that the three assignments are very linear, and I mentioned this on several occasions that if you do a good job in the case study, that the other aspects of the course and the assignments just tie together very nicely, and you can just borrow information from the previous assignment and, to help you complete the others. So the case study will lead to the decision making for the evaluation that you're going to undertake, and then the, as a result of that, you're going to develop your evaluation report, which synthesizes all the data you collected. And then the evaluation report then moves into the IEP, where you implement and find the strategies to be able to carry out the needs and the goals and the objectives that you've come up with. I also want to say again that you have a couple of opportunities here to actually involve me directly in the process of going through your IEPs. To be perfectly honest with you, in terms of uh, going through the final grading on the IEPs, you have a couple of different options. I can do it in the traditional sense where I go through your paperwork and mark up the documents as you normally would have a professor do, or you can set up a meeting with me, and we will go through those the evaluation report and the IEP together, and I can real time help you with looking at some of the issues and also answer any questions that you might have. I've already had one individual do that, and she's basically finished because she's gotten all her work completed and kind of go from there. Any special circumstances, especially for those of you that have extensive experience already teaching in special education and in writing evaluation reports and IEPs, just make sure that you're communicating with me because there may be some alternatives in terms of how we can develop a sense of what your competency level is, and may actually make things a bit easier for you and for me in terms of making that final decision. Again, my goal here is not to just have you check off boxes and turn things in. My goal here is for you to have a further understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and to look at things in a more and a deeper context. And I know from a practicality standpoint that many of these issues and skills that you're developing as a result of Riot Ice and a few other things that we talked about are not things that you will end up integrating every single day. But what the hope is that you will be able to develop a further and more complete understanding of why you're doing what you're doing, and you may be able to find some things along the way that really help to shape what you're going to do in the long run in terms of working with students and families in their best interest. So uh, in this session, I'm not going to talk about assessments as deeply, but I'm going to talk about a couple of other issues when it comes to special education and my viewpoint on how you can impact families and students, um, and what your role is in that. So the very first thing I want to talk about is something called Johari's window. And Johari's window is a, a method of communication, or a not necessarily a method, but a model of communication that I think you'll find somewhat interesting. So let me pull the Johari's window up, and I'm going to talk about it from two perspectives. One is just communication in general, and the other is communication with response to um, developing an understanding of student learning and parent needs, and then also how we can all work together to discover knowledge that maybe wasn't even out there as in a general sense before. So let me share my screen, and we'll start there. Okay, uh, close this up here or minimize it. All right, so I'm going to start here. This is called Johari's window, and you can see that it's just kind of four panels like it would be in a regular window. Don't worry about all the other stuff that's going on in the page. I'm just concerned about this. With Johari's window, as I said, it's a communication style. It's also an understanding of knowledge and so forth. Um, and when it comes to knowledge and so forth, there are a number of different things that are out there that you know and that others know. And when you think about that, that means that it's just generally available. That's considered to be open information. Now, think about this with respect to special education. You have a kid who comes into the child study arrangement, RTI, um, MTSS, whatever your district calls it, that there are things about that kid that everybody kind of knows right off the bat. You know, they're a student at your school. They're struggling in some way. They're first graders, or whatever the case may be. Everybody that's involved in the decision making process knows that basic information. So it's good to gather that information right off the bat. And a lot of that's just demographics and so forth, but and if it's not immediately known, it's pretty easily accessible. Then, if you go to the right over here, though, there are pockets of information that you don't know about a student, or your team doesn't know about a student, but other people do. Okay, so that is the blind spot, or the things that are where you're responsible for trying to gather that information and move it into the area over here in the open so that it becomes more accessible to you and to the team. So, what kinds of things might be in that blind spot? Well, it could be things having to do with family dynamics. It can have things to do with medical issues that have not been formally reported in previous documents. Um, behavioral issues that are out in the community that we don't necessarily see at the school, or that might corroborate some of the things that are going on in the school. So it's important for us to take a look at this information that others know, but we don't know. And this is the biggest component of Riot. Okay. This is how we get it. We get the information through review, interview, observing, and looking at existing test information out there that's already available to us. Those are, so again, those are the things that we want to be able to find and pull into our world of knowledge as far as the team and as far as us as teachers. Now, the thing is, once we have that information, then we're able to make more legitimate decisions on the short term and the long term. From the riot perspective, all of these things will guide us in terms of deciding what types of assessments we're going to use to get a better picture of how that kid learns or how that kid behaves in certain situations and things. All right, but there's still other pockets of information that are out there that we need to be able to access in some way. And that is go down here in the lower left hand quadrant. And there's a lot of information that we know, but other people don't know. And where does that come into play? That could come into play in a variety of situations. What's going on in the school? What kinds of information that the parents don't even know what's happening with that child, or that maybe your classroom teacher doesn't know that that Muhammad is a really nice kid in the classroom, but when he gets out of the playground, he is a terror to the other students around him. Um, and the there are a number of other things. So we have a situation where there is a ton of information out there that we know because we talk to more people or we're out there investigating this information. And it's important that we share that in some way because it gives the teacher or the parent or whoever a different perspective in which to be able from which to be able to work with that child or help that child. A good example is this. As doing an assessment, I might spot that a particular student appears to have some visual processing issues. You might have some issues with visual motor concern that are related to focusing issues with vision. I I know what to look for. So I'm able to say to the parents, um, I know you've gotten glasses for this kid, and it looks like you did your due diligence and trying to find out what can help your son or daughter see better in class. But here's the problem. It's not visual acuity that's going on with this kid. It's something else. It's how that student is actually processing that information and its visual perception. So as a result, I'm going to tell you that there are people out there, there are doctors out there that will help you to get a better handle on how your child actually perceives things from a visual perspective and not necessarily can they see 2020. That's a totally different skill set. And as a result, um, it could be something that is dramatically impacting that student's ability to learn. The average person, they figure that if they take their son or daughter to the eye doctor, that the eye doctor is going to know what they're doing and they're going to be able to say, I'm going to give you this prescription and it's going to make things better for the child. But that doesn't always work. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but it may not always work. They may still end up having some difficulties. And so as a result, then they need to be able to assess not just acuity, but other perspectives as well. That's just one example of information that my through my investigation, my testing, my working with a child on a daily basis, or you're working with a child on a daily basis, I'm able to discover that even those closest to him don't have a clue about that it's going on. So there are many, many other issues as well. Um, for example, let's talk about socially or behaviorally. We have a much better opportunity to see a student um, working in groups, working in large groups, small groups, interactively, collaborative work, whereas parents may not see as much of that. So, we're able to share our knowledge and bring them up to speed in terms of uh, what, developing that bigger picture of the kid. And keep in mind, I mean, that is the whole function of the evaluation report. We want to bring everybody up to the same level of knowledge about how this kid is functioning across the board academically, behaviorally, socially, whatever areas that you're taking a look at. There is the fourth quadrant, and that is the things that we don't know and that others don't know. And that is the big unknown over here. And things that live in the unknown are the scariest piece because we may end up being completed with an assessment and we think that we have an idea of what's going on with the kid or with the client, but we still know that as we move forward and as we continue to work with the with a child, there will be things that pop up, and there we will learn more information. That quadrant, the unknown, is the reason that we have um, progress reporting. It's the reason we have annual IEPs. It's the reason we have 3-year reevaluations. All that information that becomes more clear to us as time moves on, then that eventually can move out of that quadrant into another area. And eventually, what we want to do is move everything up into the upper left hand quadrant, which is open. And so that we can make sure that everybody has a really a much better understanding of who our student is and how they function. So we want all the information to be known to us and to be known to anybody else who has a valid interest in the child. Keep in mind that when you were talking about special education data, assessment data, and any really privacy information, that everything is based on a need to know and a right to know. And so there, somebody needs to make the decision in terms of who needs to know what and why. And so in the final analysis, then, by the time you get to the IEP team, those individuals should be identified. And even if you get to the point where it's time to go through the evaluation report and you think there's a need to bring in others, that's fine. But just make sure that they have that need to know, and they also have a right to know. And let's think about things like extended family, grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, and uncles that oftentimes want to come in as what we in. I used to sell cars, and we had a term for people that came along, and they were called the heroes. And sometimes you get the heroes that come along to IEP meetings because they're trying to be supportive, and they have sometimes have the attitude that they've been through this, they're the experts, I know something you don't know, and they want to take control. But when you take a look at the context of need to know, right to know, where do they fit in? So that's a decision that the team needs to make. You're unclear about whether individuals need to be in that upper left-hand quadrant, then that's where you have your discussion with your supervisor, your superiors, and maybe your special ed director. Kind of go from there. Okay, so to summarize here, this is a methodology of communication, a methodology of gathering information, and our goal is to take information from the 3 quadrant set or blind spots, hidden and unknown, and get that information and move more into the open area where we are all on the same level as far as the playing field is concerned, and we have access to that information so that we can make legitimate long-term decisions on what's best for the child. And that's the whole function of doing the case study, the evaluation report, and the IEP. So hopefully this will kind of start to pull things together for you in terms of why we do what we do when it comes to assessment. So that is the whole concept behind Johari's window. And by the way, Johari, Johari, while it sounds really exotic, it's not. Uh, Johari is actually stands for 2 guys by the name of Joe and Harry, who's kind of had coffee at a table one morning and sat around and started to develop this concept. So it sounds cool. It sounds, as I said, exotic, but it's really pretty basic. But the information, the concept behind it is very usable. I hope that you can grasp that and even share it with other individuals. You can even break that down and teach it as a lesson too. Maybe do it as a professional development for some of your other folks that you work with, or share it with your entire MTSS or RTI team, whatever the case may be. All right, so that's that, I want to move on to another concept. And the second concept I want to talk about is the circle of concern, circle of influence, and circle of control, and how this impacts, uh, has an impact on our assessment process. I'll share my screen again and kind of go from there. All right, here we go. So we have these three concentric circles. Read through the kind of the description of these. The outermost ring is called no, yes, the outermost ring is called a circle of concern. And even though it's listed number two, I'm going to go ahead and talk about that one first. These are the areas that concern you, but in which you generally have little or no control. And of course, they're talking about things in general here, national debt, weather, or traffic. But in terms of education, there are a lot of things that we're concerned about that we simply don't are not able to impact. Um, for example, when we first start out, we might have concerns about family issues, family dynamics. We might have concerns about whether the student is getting enough nutrition at home, um, or whether they're getting enough exercise, whether they can perform basic skills. Um, so there's a level of things out there that are called the circle of concern, and that's a pretty broad circle. As you can see, these are concentric. So um, the when things reside out here in the circle of concern, those are the things that will help us to decide what we need to assess and what kinds of information that we can gather along the way. The middle circle is the circle of influence. And these are the things that we have indirect control over, such as other people's reactions or thoughts and so forth. So we can be concerned about things, but we don't always have the ability to make a difference about those concerns. But there are a number of things that as educators we can influence and we can make a difference. And this is the whole function again of the special ed assessment process. We can be concerned about that kid and we want to assess in a way that we can move things more toward the center. And now that we have more information, we're able to make some decisions that help us to influence how that kid learns and how that kid might behave, uh, and as an individual and maybe more social. Um, so we're able to influence the way the child is in the school setting and perhaps in the community and the home setting as well. But we don't know a lot of these things until we assess them, until we gather the information and put it all together and synthesize it. Okay, again, with all of the information we gather, the first step is to just put it out there in this big table or put it on the wall with a bunch of pictures and so forth, kind of like you see the detectives do all the time. They're putting all the information and it's not connected. And then all of a sudden, they're starting to see the connections. And once it goes from, all right, this is the basic information, the things we're concerned about, and we can start to put connections, then we can move closer to the center of the circle and we might have some influence on how we can make some decisions that affect this child. The very last circle that's in the center is the circle of control. And these are the things that we have direct control over, such as our actions and responses to adversity and things like that. In the case of special education kids, that what can we control? Well, we can after gathering the information, we can control it more specifically what that child's educational um, process is going to be through the use of developing needs and goals and objectives. And then we may never get complete control over an academic deficiency or a behavioral need or a social discrepancy, but we can move toward it. And that's the whole purpose of special education and special education assessment is we will hopefully eventually take things from the circle of concern, move them to the circle of influence where we implement our strategies and eventually get to the point where we are able to control some of those issues that in the past were problematic and were interfering with that student's progress. So, uh, just like the case study, evaluation report, and IEP were linear, the same is true about this. It's very linear going from concern to influence to control. And if you use these models in terms of how you develop an understanding of kids and how you do assessments and how you develop the paperwork, it starts to make more sense why we do what we want to do when it comes to kids. We are not, as I said earlier, not just checking off boxes. That's not the point of special education. And it's not the point of education in general. The purpose of why we do what we do is to eventually look at students and give them the best opportunity to succeed. It's about equity. Okay, it's not about equality. It's not about fairness. It's not about giving kids everything that everybody else has. It's about leveling the playing field and making sure that that particular student that we're working with has all the tools and the advantages that they need to have an equal access to the education. And you know what? It's just hard to do. It's just very hard to do at times because A, not all families are the same. They're not all engaged. Not all students are the same. Not all, they don't all have the same ability to progress at the same rate. It's just the way that it is. And so we have to do our best to remember our role as kind of that conduit to success for those students. Um, so hopefully those two concepts there give you a little bit better understanding of actually what this course is about and why we do it. Um, and I'm a firm believer that before you can do something at a level of proficiency or and to be confident in something, you first have to know why you're doing it. I mean, it's not a matter of just pulling levers and watching things fall into place. That's not the way this works. And I know that sometimes, particularly with paperwork, I know that sometimes that's kind of the way it feels. Is you have to do this in order to satisfy the what state mandates are, or what your special ed director requires, or what your building principal's asking to do. I get that. I understand that sometimes that's the way it feels. But as special educators, we have to kind of move away from that and just develop an understanding that we are in a position to make a huge difference in that child's life. Doesn't matter whether it's something as simple as a articulation issue in speech, or if they are going through periods of emotional concern that put them at risk for suicide, things like that. It we still need to accept our responsibility and our abilities to make a difference and make a change in that child's life. Um, so that's that. A little bit shorter video this week because I think that you're busy enough trying to get all the paperwork completed. Please let me know in any way how I can help you. Text me, call me, email me, and we could set up a Zoom session or get on in the course room and talk a little more about what your needs might be. Um, Next week's video is going to be kind of a wrap up, and it's going to be shorter too. So again, the last couple of weeks of the course, I don't like to overload in this regard. I want you to be able to have some time to go ahead and complete the paperwork. Again, if you are an experienced teacher, um, and you want to talk to me about uh, possibly taking a different perspective on what you're doing, that please make sure you contact me. Um, and again, if you want the traditional paper pencil write up on the grading of the final the ER and the IEP, that's fine. If not, if you'd like to go over this verbally together, more or less go through it like you would at an IEP meeting, where we go through the paper and I make comments as you're going along. I'm fine with that too. Whatever you think would be more valuable to you. All right. Well, that's it for the number 6 video. If you need anything else, as I said, let me know. Have a good week.